September 1st, 1939. German tanks rolled across the Polish border, and the world held its breath. Within days, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun, a conflict that would consume 6 years, claim over 70 million lives, and reshape the entire global order. This is the story of humanity's darkest hour, and how the world emerged forever changed. The seeds of this catastrophic war were planted 2 decades earlier. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, left Germany humiliated and economically devastated. Massive reparations, lost territory, and national shame created fertile ground for extremism. Into this chaos stepped Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Promising to restore German greatness, Hitler became chancellor in 1933. He quickly dismantled democracy, rebuilt the military in defiance of treaty obligations, and began pursuing an aggressive expansion policy rooted in racial ideology and territorial conquest. Meanwhile, across the globe, Imperial Japan sought to dominate Asia, invading Manchuria in 1931 and China in 1937. In Italy, Benito Mussolini's fascist regime dreamed of recreating the Roman Empire. The major democracies, scarred by the previous war and mired in economic depression, chose appeasement over confrontation. When Hitler annexed Austria and then Czechoslovakia, the world watched. But Poland would be different. Britain and France had drawn a line they could not ignore. The German war machine was devastating. Using blitzkrieg, lightning war, tactics combining tanks, aircraft, and infantry in coordinated strikes, Poland fell in just 4 weeks. The Soviet Union, having signed a non-aggression pact with Germany, invaded from the east and claimed its share of Polish territory. The so-called phony war followed, with little combat through the winter. But in April 1940, Germany struck northward, occupying Denmark and Norway. Then came the catastrophic blow. In May, German forces swept through Belgium and France, bypassing the supposedly impregnable Maginot Line. Paris fell in June. France, the great military power of Europe, surrendered after just 6 weeks of fighting. Britain now stood alone. Through the summer and fall of 1940, the Royal Air Force fought desperately against the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. British cities endured relentless bombing during the Blitz, but the RAF held. Hitler's planned invasion of Britain never came to the Mediterranean and North Africa. Italian and German forces battled British and Commonwealth troops. In the Balkans, Yugoslavia and Greece fell to Axis invasion. By mid-1941, Nazi Germany controlled most of continental Europe. June 22, 1941. Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history. Nearly 4 million Axis troops invaded the Soviet Union along a 2,000-mile front. The Nazi-Soviet pact was shattered. Initially, German forces advanced rapidly, encircling entire Soviet armies. But the vast distances, harsh weather, and fierce Soviet resistance slowed the invasion. By December, German forces were stalled outside Moscow in brutal winter conditions. The Lightning War had become a grinding war of attrition. Then, on December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Over 2,400 Americans died, and much of the Pacific Fleet was destroyed or damaged. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan. Days later, Germany and Italy declared war on America. The war was now truly global, spanning every inhabited continent and all the world's oceans. The Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, faced the Allies, Britain, the Soviet Union, the United States, China, and dozens of other nations. The year 1942 brought mixed fortunes. Japan conquered vast territories across Southeast Asia and the Pacific. German forces pushed deep into the Soviet Union, reaching Stalingrad on the Volga River. But the limits of Axis expansion were becoming cleared. Midway in June 1942, American naval forces dealt Japan a crushing defeat, sinking 4 aircraft carriers and shifting the Pacific naval balance. In North Africa, British forces under Montgomery defeated Rommel's Afrika Korps at El Alamein in October. American and British forces landed in Northwest Africa in November, squeezing Axis forces between 2 fronts. But the most pivotal battle raged at Stalingrad. From August 1942 to February 1943, German and Soviet forces fought for every building, every street, every room. When it ended, an entire German army had been destroyed. It was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. In 1943, the Allies landed in Sicily and then mainland Italy. Mussolini was overthrown, and Italy switched sides, though fighting continued as German forces occupied the country. In the Pacific, American forces began the long, bloody island-hopping campaign toward Japan. The Soviet Red Army, now supplied with vast amounts of American equipment, began pushing the Germans westward in massive offensives. The industrial might of the United States, safely distant from enemy attack, poured forth an avalanche of weapons, vehicles, ships, and aircraft that the Axis could never match. June 6, 1944, D-Day. Over 150,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy in the largest amphibious invasion in history. Despite terrible casualties, the Allies established their foothold in Western Europe. Paris was liberated in August. By autumn, Allied forces approached Germany's borders from both east and west. But as Allied armies advanced, they discovered the full horror of Nazi crimes. Concentration camps revealed the systematic murder of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust, along with millions of others deemed undesirable by Nazi ideology: Roma, disabled people, political prisoners, and homosexuals. The world would never forget these atrocities. In December 1944, Germany launched a desperate counteroffensive in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge, but was ultimately thrown back. In the Pacific, American forces captured islands ever closer to Japan at tremendous cost. The battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa were among the bloodiest of the entire war. By April 1945, Soviet forces surrounded Berlin. Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker on April 30th. On May 7th, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. Japan fought on. On August 6th and 9th, 1945, American B-29 bombers dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the first and only use of nuclear weapons in warfare. The devastation was unprecedented and instantaneous. On August 15th, Japan announced its surrender. World War II was finally over. The cost defies comprehension. Over 70 million people dead, more than 3% of the world's population. Entire cities reduced to rubble, millions displaced from their homes. The Holocaust stood as humanity's darkest crime. The atomic bomb had introduced a weapon capable of ending civilization itself, but from the ashes, a new world order emerged. The United Nations was founded to prevent such catastrophe from happening again. The victorious Allies divided much of the world into spheres of influence, setting the stage for the Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union. Colonial empires began crumbling as independence movements gained strength. The trials at Nuremberg established that individuals could be held accountable for crimes against humanity, regardless of whether they were following orders. Germany and Japan were rebuilt as democratic nations. The European integration movement began, eventually leading to the European Union, former enemies bound together to ensure lasting peace. World War II accelerated technological development, from jet engines to computers to rockets that would eventually take humans to the moon. It transformed society, bringing women into the workforce in unprecedented numbers and beginning the long process of racial integration in the military and beyond. The generation that fought this war, that endured occupation and bombing, that liberated death camps and rebuilt shattered nations, would forever be known as the greatest generation. Their sacrifice purchased the freedom we enjoy today. The last veterans pass from living memory. It falls to us to remember the cost of unchecked hatred, the dangers of appeasement, the price of freedom, and the resilience of the human spirit. World War II didn't just change history. It changed everything.